Hello, my name is Christy Pennington. I served as the DeKalb Association of Realtors president in 2006. It's been more than 50 years that the DeKalb Association of Realtors received its charter as the DeKalb Board of Realtors. I'm excited to be part of an initiative to preserve and to share the rich history of this organization. Joining me today is Patricia Haynes, our 1995 president. Welcome.
Thank you. And you know, it's nice to hear that I'm part of the history, because I certainly feel like that most of the time. And I was the president when it was the DeKalb Board of Realtors.
And Patricia, if you will, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you even get started in the real estate industry?
You can blame my husband for my getting into real estate.
Okay.
When we moved here in 1970, I had 4 children, and the little one was still ready to start school. And we put her in a private school because she'd been told that she was very smart and that she shouldn't do another year of kindergarten. So, and her birth, you know, even though her birthday was very early. But anyway, to make a long story short, when I got her in school and got her into 2nd grade, the first year I did have to do a lot of carpooling for her 1st grade. And so when she entered elementary school in DeKalb County, in 2nd grade, my husband said, "You know what? You're going to be bored silly." Well, I had worked for the telephone company before we married, and I had a very good job in the commercial department, and we thought about my going back to that. But that would have meant that I was going to be on the freeway at 7 o'clock in the morning, not serving cereal, Pop-Tarts, or whatever it was they wanted. And we didn't want that. So he said, "You know what? You ought to go into real estate." He says, "That looks like an easy job." He says, "And you can just do it when you want to." My husband learned later that that was not the truth. But anyway, he said, "You know, you have done the schoolwork, the PTAs, and the church works, and the garden clubs, and all that sort of stuff." And he's right. I probably would have been bored. So that's when I started in 72. I passed the test on Valentine's Day of 1972, and I'd been studying during the Olympics that were in Japan, I believe, that year, and we had to wait. I'd be up late at night, and we'd be waiting for them to land with the tapes and everything in New York so they could feed it, because nothing was live like it is now. And so it was a very interesting time to go into real estate. It was not particularly a good time, but I didn't know any better. And I was very happy. I started out with a company that gave me training also in addition. You were not required at that time to even take courses before you could pass your test. I did. But I took the test, the exam, before my class was up. And my professor or instructor had sort of indicated that we would probably all be back to take it again because we wouldn't pass the test. I passed the test 3 weeks before we finished the class. And so when he gave me his congratulatory, he said, "Well, I guess maybe I'll see you back." And I said, "Well, I don't think so, because I've already passed the exam and I'm ready to go to work." But we all know that that's another story.
Great. Also, would you set the scene for us in real estate during the year of your presidency? And what were some of the challenges facing realtors at that time?
You know, we really didn't have the challenges then that you've had in the more recent years. We were having a pretty good time. It was 1995, and the main thing that we did that year, we sold it or gave it away, MLS, because we had owned it. And it had become sort of a problem for boards to own MLSs because of lawsuits and things like that. And that was the year, because I think my name is on the signature page. So I remember thinking, "Oh my goodness, is this going to be my legacy?" But we actually had a very calm year, and real estate was doing pretty good.
Awesome.
Now, I didn't work as hard when I was so involved with the board with real estate. I did a lot of activities with the board and had been doing them for years because I enjoyed them so much. after my presidency and the next year of being vice president, that's what you did back then. You went down, you know, the chairs are different now, and I think they're very good, but once you became president, the next year you became vice president.
Okay, that's a switch.
Yeah, it's sort of a switch. And so after that, I kind of withdrew. I thought it was time for other people to start doing things. And, you know, I was still involved with the state organization. I was still a director and everything. But I did not, I went to work really and worked a little harder in real estate.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. Okay. And I know you have these, but please share with us some of your favorite DeKalb board memories.
Oh my goodness. Some of them we probably shouldn't share.
Well, okay, the ones that you can.
No, I'm serious. You know, we really had wonderful times, and I guess that's why I enjoyed it so much, because it was fun. Probably the highlight of not of my presidency, because this was long before I became president, but of my career, so to speak, with the DeKalb Association, and the DeKalb board at that time, was when we did the first holiday festival. It was sort of an idea that I had, and when I think back on it, I don't know how I did it, to tell you the truth. We did not have the kitchen in the building. In fact, probably that was the reason we got one, because I complained so much and said we have to have a kitchen. We had the whole place set up as international. It was an international holiday festival, and we had it was free, and I begged, borrowed, and everything else money, and we did most of the work ourselves.
Really?
And my rec room was filled with stuff that we ended up using. And like some of the members, we had a German room, and they had all these foods from Germany. And we had the board of directors room, the conference room, and you know, that's not a very big room.
No.
We set up a table, and we had like Greek, France, and this is terrible, but I can't remember the third country of the tablecloth there. We have a video of that.
Really?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
An old-fashioned video, and it was sort of interesting. And we decorated, and I remember that we had pastries, we had different things, and people came and they ate and ate and ate. We had, you know, Japanese, we had sushi, and in one room, and people, you know, everybody dressed up and decorated, you know, their room, and they decorated themselves. And then we had upstairs was the United States, up in the MLS room, and we still had no kitchen up there. We had a little storeroom that we put food in and brought it out, and like I said, I don't know how we did it.
So you utilized the whole building for that
The next
event.
year we had one that was based on the states because it was so successful. We had another one the next year, and we had it on regions, like, and maybe states that were, we had a Hawaii set up. And I remember that we bought a roasted pig. I found somebody, he did it on a truck. He had a setup, and it was near Columbia Drive, and he did it, and somebody told me about him, and I went over there, and he did a little pig for us. And we had that, and I remember we used my husband's truck, and one of the members' husbands and we went and got that pig and brought it back.
Wow.
It was something, but you know, we still have those festivals, but we don't have them. Naturally, anything that you do for the first time, and with Realtors, anything you do free.
Brings them out in droves.
It brings them out in droves.
That's
and
right.
The people really, I mean, it was a wonderful thing. But there is a video somewhere. It used to be in the library. And it just shows people, but it's not of the caliber that we have nowadays.
Right. Are there any specific achievements that you would say that you're most proud of? Or was that just bringing in the members?
Well, that was not the year of my presidency. My goal always was to try to get more people involved.
Mm.
And I think that's very hard, and it's even harder now. It's harder in any type of association
Mm-hmm.
that you're in. People, they want to do things, but they don't want to do the work.
Mm.
They're busy.
Mm.
Everybody's too busy almost.
Mm.
And of course, when I was in that period, we did not have the technology. But when we were starting to have the technology, I will say, even though I'm an old salt, I was one that jumped right on it.
Huh.
I had a computer very early,
Mm-hmm.
and they used to kid me because I think I was one of the earliest agents to start making appointments by emails. And I would just get so upset because all these people, oh, I never thought about that. And you know, it's the easiest thing because emails are wonderful because you have the record.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I did that with my customers. If I really wanted to make sure they had something, you do it in an email and you keep a copy in your file.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that way you didn't tell me that. And you have
get the
proof. Yeah,
documentation.
and you know that happens a lot with another agent, co-oping and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the records. I think one of my pet peeves is when agents call you on your cell phone for feedback. And you might possibly be in your car and you have no idea what house they're talking about.
Right.
And you know, that was another thing I always did by email. I sent the address of the house and the date that they showed it. So it would connect them maybe with a customer. And ask for feedback that way. And I don't know how because I have not really been active since about, I think 2008 was the last year that I really worked.
Mm.
And I began, and you know, one of the reasons I retired, you do have so many challenges. You have a lot of things that help you, this technology, that can also be a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that. Wouldn't you like sometimes to take that phone and just throw it across the room? And you know, it's very tempting and it's very dangerous with the texting and talking on the phones nowadays. I used to talk on the phone with hands free, but I don't do that anymore. I just don't answer the phone if I'm driving. And when I text, but you know, it throws you off just the very minute that you hear it. And you're distracted then. And so, and in Atlanta traffic, you know, when I first went into real estate, we thought nothing of just jumping in the car and flying all the way up to Cobb County. And I worked and sold a lot of houses in Cobb County because I had some out-of-town people and things like that, and you had to show them. And I considered myself very knowledgeable about areas. We didn't have GPSs, but you know, some of us were better. There were some agents, we used to make a joke about an agent that her people bought houses from her because they wanted to get back to the office. And but you know, really and truly, it is hard. But you've got all this technology to help you nowadays, but you don't have anything to help you with the traffic.
True. Very, very true. True. What has been, to you, the most dramatic change in real estate over the years? And how has it affected
The internet.
The internet.
And even though I've been talking about ways that I thought were very helpful and everything, it is also very distracting and a challenging type thing for people nowadays with their buyers, because their buyers many times, I think it's had to make your agents a lot smarter.
True.
Because so many people are using the internet. When I bought my condo in Oregon, and those agents had it good for so long, I used to laugh because I said, boy, I think the Atlanta agents are so much better because we've had it harder. And they had such a good market with all the Californians coming up to buy houses, and all they said was, you mean you only want that much for that house? And they didn't even, I mean, they crossed the river and, you don't really want to go over there, do you? I knew more about the area than they did, and the reason was that I had already done a lot of searching on the internet. And I think a lot of people do that now.
That's true.
You know,
That's very true.
you know, Realtor.com was just coming out when I remember they were all just really, it wasn't, it was a new thing, and they didn't want National to spend that money on the internet and everything. And now we have so many sites.
Yes.
I mean, you can't even keep up with them. And that's challenging for the realtors, because their people, when they call them, they have a list usually.
True.
In some ways, it makes it easier now. What I enjoyed about it was I could give, the first thing I ask is, do you have email? Do you have your internet availability? And I would send them a list of, of houses. And a lot of times they just drove by and ruled them out, and everything. And that helps. That saves us time, money, and gas.
Absolutely.
And time is probably our most important thing. Yes. And what you really want to do when you're showing and selling is, you've heard agents say, "Oh, well, I showed them 100 houses." Well, they showed them too many houses, and they also made their work a whole lot harder. Because what you've got to do, the reason they call you is to help them sort through. And I don't mean that you should make decisions for them, but you have to find out what they want and then help them. And sometimes they don't really know, but you have to listen.
Right.
That's the most important thing.
Listen. What would you say are some of the benefits of being a realtor versus just a licensee?
Oh, I'm very big on that. I remember when we would have liked to have just put all the licensees away. But, you can't do that. And it's changed a lot. But the Realtor logo, the National Association has done a very good job of public relations, I think. Because realtors may not be on the top of everybody's favorite list. We sometimes get kind of close to attorneys.
Like, oh, no, really?
And it's just, it makes us a professional. Most professional groups, it elevates us.
Yes.
And I think that's very important. It is to me.
Very good point. Absolutely. Now, I know you have a lot of advice, but what one piece of advice that you received when you started out in real estate that you would share with another new realtor coming into the business?
Well, my very first associate broker, she was very good, and she listened. We had a man, very nice man, that was the main broker. She was the associate broker. She did more with us than he did.
Okay.
He patted us on the back and he laughed with us and everything like that, but she really worked with us. And I remember her telling me that and when I started with Spratlin, which hadn't been in business for a long, long time. And they had, the reason I started with them is they had the most professional training set up of anybody. And Carl Nix was the director of that program, and he taught me after I went to work. Back then you had to have a sponsor.
That's right.
To even take the examination. And so, brokers did want to sponsor people because they wanted new agents.
True.
And so, but my associate broker told me, she said, the most important thing you can do is to know about houses. And she told me that I should look at least 5 houses every day.
Every day.
Didn't matter whether I was working or not. And I know that sounds difficult, but you could go by, and I did go to look at a lot of houses those first 2 or 3 years. And then I pretty much quit because I had a good memory for them. And I knew the areas, and I knew where certain houses were and things like that. And I didn't have to go see as many. Of course, Caravan is very helpful, and many times, and several times, I went to see a house, and I went straight back to the office and called up somebody. But you have to know what you're going to sell.
Right.
And looking at a picture doesn't always work. Now, many people say, oh, well, I sold a house that somebody saw on the internet, and they never saw it, and they came into town and bought it. And maybe they bought it before I even heard those. And that does happen, but that's a rare. That fact, like my husband used to laugh when I'd tell him that story. He says, well, that wouldn't have been you. I said, no.
You like to get up close and personal.
I want. That's exactly right. But you really have to know. And then when you get with your customer, because you may not have a customer when you first go into the business, you want to spread your name around as much as possible. And they used to tell us too to pass out your cards everywhere you went. And sometimes I did, and sometimes I didn't. But I knew about houses, and I could talk about them even at a party. You'd be surprised how many people. I used to go to parties all the time after I got better established, and people would take me aside. I would have liked to have sold some of that advice that I gave out. That's what I really wanted to be, was a real estate consultant.
Gotcha.
And I went to a seminar at National, but then I found out that what I'd been doing was giving away my information for way too long. Because I had lots of customers call me up and get all my advice and then go buy something else.
Okay. Patricia, what do you see for the future of the DeKalb, well now, association, and what goals would you like to see for the next generation achieve?
Well, the main thing is try to get those people involved, and it's hard, especially the very successful ones. They're so busy, and they really, the only reason a lot of them join is because they have to.
Okay.
You know.
Yes.
And some of our most successful people are not ever active in the board, which is sad, but that isn't going to change. But we have to make the board help them. I used to say about getting them to come to meetings and things, and I watch you because I still get your newsletters and things like that, and I think y'all are doing a great job. I really do. And I was very impressed at the past president's luncheon the other day with some of the new people, the energy they have, and the knowledge. And I do think that real estate agents now are better educated. You know, it was used to be, just like my husband wanted me to go, a housewife going and doing the job. But, you know, they were knowledgeable. Don't get me wrong, some of those women were very knowledgeable about real estate and everything, but they were not educated in it. Now we have the education, and that's important. And I fought, because when I was on committees, and one year I was actually chairman of the state legislative thing, we fought hard to get more training and more qualification and certification. And even though I was grandfathered in, I could, you know, I didn't have to do it, but I did it. Because you've got to learn. And I did, and I always worked for companies that kept up our continuing education, even though I didn't have to keep it up. But I went and took those courses. And, you know, now it seems like we're changing that contract.
Again.
Well, I can't think how many times it's changed just since I more or less stopped selling.
True.
And you know, the lawyer's in control of that. And that was another thing that we said for a long time there, we were basically practicing law, and we weren't supposed to. Because when you write those stipulations, that's what you do. Now, that was a good thing that Spratland had. They had a very good, you know, we had the one-page contract. Now, you could add to it, but Spratland also had like 4 or 5 pages of special stipulations that we could add, and we could copy them. Of course, they were written by an attorney, but I remember one of the real estate attorneys told me one time, he says, you know, all you have to do is say it in simple language that everyone understands. And, you know, most of the time back then, we wrote a contract and handed it to a secretary. Now, this was in the early days. And that secretary typed it. Do you remember typewriters?
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have word processors. You know, we later had word processors, and then, of course, we did the computer, where we could do all this stuff at home late at night. You know, I wrote contracts on the hood of a car, handwritten contracts, and they're just as binding. Now, we usually retyped them, but if you got somebody's signature on it and everything else, I did that at a subdivision. I did them on the counters of a new house. while the people are there, whip out that contract.
Get them on paper.
And get them on paper.
Wow.
And it wasn't, I mean, I never did a hard sell or anything like that. I mean, I didn't believe in that. But if they're ready to buy and the house is there, what better time
Then to
write the contract? Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why I used to tell owners, sellers that I had listed, leave the house if somebody comes back the second time. The first time you don't have to, inconvenience yourself. If they're coming back the second time, get out of there. Because you might say the wrong time, you will interrupt. That agent knows what they're doing. And they know how to, and sometimes they would say, well, you came through the house and you didn't say anything. You didn't talk hardly at all. And I said, well, I knew what my people needed, and sometimes it's just to be quiet. Shut your mouth. And, let them get involved with the house. But I was a psychology major in college, and I always thought that helped me a whole lot.
Yes.
Learning how to read people is one of the most important things. I think that one of the things they taught us in one of our early classes or something was find out if it's a couple, figure out which one is the decision maker. It's usually the wife. If the man is smart.
What, happy wife?
And
I
worked with a lot of reload people. They were mostly mine. And I had a CEO tell me one time, he said, he used to give me customers. And he said, he'd call me back and want to know how they were doing. He says, I want a guy that comes in here with his family or his wife, most of the time by himself, the wife. And maybe he might have looked ahead of time and knows a few, but when he brings it, he says, I want him making that decision by no later than the third day. And one of the hardest customers I had was a CEO.
Okay.
And he about drove his wife crazy, and he kept changing his mind, and he cost her 3 houses. And finally we had to do a bill job. Because she wanted this particular house by the builder. And finally I got that builder to come and meet us at another subdivision, and he agreed to beat him the house. You have to be resourceful. And you can't just go out and expect to slam dunk it.
True. So what I'm hearing, though, it sounds like you're in support of, as far as with increasing education and the CE.
Absolutely. Education is the key to everything. If you're informed and you're educated, you can make proper decisions. Your public is better educated. With the internet and everything, just like I said, they've got those houses out there. I do that when I buy a car, don't you? And, anything. I look at a lot of stuff, and I like to look at the real estate sites. And like my niece that stays in my house when I'm gone from Atlanta, she loves those listed or sell it or whatever, Property Brothers. My God, those guys have made a fortune. And it's not as easy as they make it.
No, that's
they have a whole crew that's paid by the television networks too. And all those renovations and everything. But people are always, and like I mentioned before about the parties, there was always somebody there that wanted to talk real estate. What do you think my house is worth? That's their favorite thing, and probably still is. Maybe not so much now because your houses aren't appreciating like they used to.
The market's a little challenging.
Oh, it's very challenging. And see, that's one of the reasons. See, I thought that when I retired, that it was going to drive me crazy because it's been 43, I guess, since I passed my test. But I haven't been active since about 2008 or 2009. But I still, try to keep informed about it. But I would know more. I mean, I wouldn't take anybody out and sell them a house now. I would give them to another agent. But you have to stay informed because it is so challenging.
Absolutely.
And your customers, like I've said many times, they're better informed than ever. And they've looked at a lot more stuff maybe than you have when you start showing them in that particular section. But that can help you too. Find out what they've seen. Find out what they've liked. The worst person to work with is the person that likes everything.
That's a good point.
Really and truly.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pilot bring his wife in here one time, and he said, I just have to tell you, my wife likes everything, but I don't want to look at everything. And I said, I need you. And someone had told him that I was very good and patient and things like that. And I did. I screened out. And the worst time I had with both of them was getting them to the last house that I wanted them to buy. I mean, because I had set it up, and I knew that was, and they did buy it, but they wanted to buy one that came before. And I said, well, you can buy it, but we have to go see this other house first.
And they bought the latter.
And they bought the last one. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But, she did like everything.
Really?
She really did. And when you can't rule anything out, oh, it's terrible. You could show houses forever. And, you need to, and I told them sometimes it is more important for me to know what you don't like than what you do like. And I said, and if we're in a house and there's something that you really can't, that you haven't told me about, you need to let me know. And I know you've worked with people that there's all kinds of crazy things. I had a couple come in here, it was a very prominent thing, and they wanted, this was back when, hadn't been too long, when Golden Pond was, that movie.
That movie, right.
And they both told me, they said, we know it's not really practical, but we would just love, and it wasn't practical, and they didn't buy it, but I want you to know, they said, we would love a house like on Golden Pond. And I want you to know that I found one in Northwest Atlanta, but they did not buy it. They ended up buying in Dunwoody because it was practical. They had the family and everything, and the Dunwoody thing. The other house was, they said that's our house for later on, but they could not believe that I had found it. And sometimes that's kind of fun when somebody really gives you a challenge. Do it. They may not buy that house, but show them that you know what they're talking about. Back to listen.
All right. Daryl, do you have anything else?
Except that I talk too fast and too
pause it for a second?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to. Okay, now.
When we used to go to the national conventions, they were very well set up. National does a great job of setting up education programs, and that's what I'd like to see more agents going to. Now it's been watered down a bit because your corporations, your franchises, all have the gatherings, the conventions of their own. And they're good. I'm trying to think if I've ever been, I don't think I've ever been to one of the franchises, so I really am not qualified to say if they're as good. I've been to a lot of meetings and things, but the National Association Convention is just not to be missed, really. I mean, every year I look at it and I think, can I work that in? Now that I'm retired, I have no time. But anyway, my husband didn't go to all of them with me, but when he did, they had this wonderful program. I'm not sure that's in effect now because it was expensive. As long as you registered your spouse, and I always did, they were allowed to go anywhere you went.
Right.
And that's the way it should be. You shouldn't be able to get them in free.
Right.
And they had a little program, and you signed up for it because it was a little bit limited, and you had to be registered. And I called it adult daycare. It was so entertaining, and I was going to meetings and doing stuff like that. And we, when we met in the afternoon or evening, he was telling me about all. I said, "You got to do that," and I was in a meeting all day, and everything. He enjoyed it. He just loved it. And one time he went to Mexico. He went to the winery when we were in San Francisco and Hawaii. I think he did 2 or 3 things. He was more adventurous than I was. He did the helicopters and stuff like that. When we were at Las Vegas, he did the helicopter over the Grand Canyon. I didn't leave anything down there, and I'm not going back. But I'd rather stay and play at the casinos. But anyway, that was a wonderful program and things like that. And we met a lot of people. We went to China. on a real estate side trip.
Did
that
you?
they
Okay.
And we'd already been once.
Uh-huh.
And
So
this
this-
one sounded even better, and we were going back to Hawaii. And the worst thing about going to China is the long flight. And I said, we're going to be halfway there. Why don't we sign up for this too?
And go to China.
And we did, and that was a wonderful trip. And we met a lot.
Mhm.
There were realtors. It was really an exclusive realtor thing. That's what it was. And they were from all over the country, and we got to know them, and we became friends with some of them. And our guides were really interesting people. And one of them even came to visit us in Atlanta. She came over here. And no, the national conventions, I just wish we could get more people to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's always
expensive.
right, but it's
Yes.
a
Yes.
challenge. But you're right.
And the directors, our
Mhm.
board can't afford to pay for. I don't know whether we give our directors any money now to go to anything. I know we pay for the president.
Right. We've had to kind of cut back, just because
Well,
of it.
everything's so
exactly.
expensive. And years ago, the mortgage companies used to pay for a lot of things. I know when you go to a national convention, you don't get a lot of the stuff you used to get.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because of
money and
RESPA.
yeah.
Right.
And some of it is good. They used to pay for a lot of alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I strongly believe that when people drink, they should pay for their
Own
own
drinks.
Well, lawsuits and
Mhm,
but
right.
it's a simple thing. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this question's probably not on the list, but, and it was kind of on there, if you had to give advice to a younger agent coming in, but if you could go back, was it 43 years? And give advice to
Me?
a young Patricia Haynes
Yeah.
coming into the business.
Well, that's hard because, when I started in, I had a very young and active family. Well, I mean, there was no babies or anything like that. I don't understand how the young ones do it with their babies and everything. But then all women work now from the time. I was fortunate enough that that generation didn't work unless you had and we didn't have careers. We might have had jobs. I said I majored in psychology, but see, I did not graduate. I got married.
Okay.
I got the MRS degree. And my husband used to get mad when I tell him that I quit college because of him. And he says, I didn't ever make you. And I said, no, but I was afraid you'd get away.
Oh, okay. Well, that must have made him feel good.
Yeah. Well, he was older. He had everything behind him and an established job.
Oh.
And I was watching my friends marry and having to support their husbands. And then, most everybody back then, they went into the service as soon as they got out of college, which was fun.
Right.
But he'd already done that, so I didn't have to do it.
Great.
But no, what I would tell them mostly is network. It's really important. I probably didn't network as much as I should have, but see, my focus those first few years was my family once they graduated.
Sure.
And even though, I said my husband was thinking it was part-time, it is not part-time, and it makes me angry when I hear about part-time agents. It is flexible. I could arrange to be at the school when I needed to be at the school for a special program or anything or a conference. I could make sure that I was home unless I had an out-of-towner. And my other children were old enough to look after the one that was in second grade when I first went in. Also, the most important thing you can have if you're a woman is both ways, I'm sure, is a supportive spouse.
True.
And if they don't like what you're doing, you might ought to think about either giving one of the things up, because if they don't like it, it's going to be really tough. And there are a lot of divorces because of it. If I ever got discouraged, and of course I did once in a while, then my husband would give me this 5-minute spiel on why I should stay in real estate.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he never said you should quit. He might have been later, if I'd ever really said I'm going to quit, he might have said, well, that's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because he never, but if I got discouraged, he would start going on and on. And he told me a lot of times, because back then too, another thing that would happen is people would actually come to your house. I sold in the general, a lot in the general area that I lived. A few years later, I remember losing some listings to a couple of other agents that moved in, and they said, you know, she said, oh, well, she doesn't sell anywhere except Dunwoody or something like that, which was a joke, you know. I sold anywhere my people didn't, but they had told, because the people told me. I mean, I ended up giving the business anyway.
Okay, okay, well, when you're good, Patricia.
But you know, but I don't hardly know anybody. I still live in the same neighborhood, but I don't hardly know anybody in the neighborhood anymore, you know, because things have changed.
Right.
But I worked mainly with personal referrals, just about. And I did get a lot of personal referrals. I was never a superstar or anything like that. I did make, you know, $1 million clubs and things like that, but I was not particularly consistent. But when I was involved with the board, I worked more for the board than I did for anybody else. I made enough money, but I didn't, that was another thing. My money was not to live on. And when you start in this business, now you have to spend more money than you used to because of all the technology. Of course, most of us have, but you've got to keep it. See, back then, and we had these notebooks. My daughter used to say that we all looked alike. We carried these notebooks, and you stayed up at night. You got a flyer with the listings that were out that day. Nothing was done quick. And you got the list that had been sold, and that's why you had to call everybody to make sure that that house was still available. Because sometimes you didn't get the word, and if you didn't keep your book up, and you were looking through it, and you hadn't pulled out you just tore out the souls. Or you put them, if they were under contract, you wrote under contract on them. And you kept them in there till they were closed.
That was your inventory.
Because see, this sheet came from, now, see, I worked for a company that was only in FMLS. I worked, Spratling was only in FMLS, and then most of all the agents ended up leaving Spratling because they made you turn around and start your commission thing over. Once you got up, you had to start back at the end, and they had this great training program. So these other, Harry Norman, Royer, they were just sitting there waiting for
Spratling agents.
For Spratling agents. And there was a whole group of us that quit at the same time.
Wow.
And I went to Royer. Most of them went to Royer, but a whole bunch of them went to Harry Norman.
Wow.
And some of them are, you know, still there. And of course, what are they turning into now? We got it out in Eugene. That
Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah.
Berkshire Hathaway.
We got it out there. They bought Prudential out there.
They did, Prudential.
Did they buy Prudential here?
I believe so. They
well,
sure
it was
did.
like, you know, Caldwell Banker bought Buckhead Brokers and then bought Northside. And see, I worked for, and when Northside, they weren't on anybody's MLS.
No, that's true.
They had their own lockbox, and if you went to Cobb County without a Northside key, you were in trouble. And I wore my lockbox keys around my neck for years and years and years. And when
that was your jewelry.
I wore. I still put my keys around my neck and things like that. And the lockbox, that was when it was just a key.
Right.
But even when it became a thing, I had a pouch and I had a lariat, and then they finally started making them.
That's true.
Because I took my keys out of the car, I hooked them on to the thing. I put, my purse was always in the trunk. And if my customers wanted, but I locked my car. I don't care where I was. But I did not take my purse. I might have a pen or something like that. Couldn't stand it to have clothes that didn't have pockets. And I always said I was going to invent some kind of an apron that had all this stuff. And now, you know, you've got the, see, we weren't carrying computers when I was still doing it. And, but now the smartphones, you've got it all with that. And, you know, it's totally different and great.
Awesome.
You know, we have to advance with technology.
Absolutely. Well, Patricia Haynes, our 1995 president of the DeKalb Association, we'd like to really thank you for coming and sharing your wonderful memories and all your service.
It is a wonderful life. And I'm
Yes.
sorry that more people don't enjoy it as much as I did.
Thank you.
And, being back with all
Mhm.
of you the other day was wonderful. It really was.
Aw.
And so